Hello again, everybody. This is Kasem, and it's Saturday night, February 18th, 1984. If you're listening right now, in your car, at home, wherever you are, I want to tell you about a letter that arrived at my studio 3 days ago. A letter from a woman named Linda. She's 40 years old. She lives in Tennessee, and she wanted to thank me for something I didn't know I'd done. She wanted to thank me for remembering her father. Her father's name was Robert. And 16 years ago, January 13th, 1960, Trabert was sitting in Folsom State Prison in California. He was 25 years old. He was on death row, and he was about to see Johnny Cash perform live. It would be the last concert Robert ever attended. 2 months later, he'd be dead, executed, gone. But for one afternoon, in 1968, Robert got to do something impossible, something that should never have happened, something that changed everything. He got to sing with Johnny Cash. On stage, in front of 2,000 inmates, in front of the whole world. This is the story of that day, and the promise Johnny Cash made, and why, 16 years later, Robert's daughter wanted to say thank you. Folsom Prison, January 1968. Folsom State Prison, California. One of the toughest prisons in America. Built in 1880. Stone walls, steel bars, men locked away for murder, robbery, violence, and in 1968, some of them waiting to die. Death row. The worst of the worst. Men who'd been sentenced to execution, sitting in cells, waiting for their day, waiting for the gas chamber, waiting to die. Robert was one of them. 25 years old, convicted of murder in 1965, sentenced to death. 3 years on death row, 3 years waiting. Robert's story. I need to tell you what Robert did, not to justify it, not to excuse it, but to understand who he was, and why that moment with Johnny Cash mattered so much. Robert Miller, born 1943, Sacramento, California. Poor family. Father worked construction. Mother cleaned houses. Robert was the oldest of 4 kids. Dropped out of high school at 16. Started working odd jobs. Got mixed up with the wrong people. In 1965, Robert was 22 years old. He'd been drinking heavily at a bar in Sacramento. Got into an argument with another man. Over money, over a woman, nobody remembers exactly. But it escalated. Robert pulled a knife. Stabbed the man. The man died. Robert fled. Got caught 2 days later. Arrested, charged with first-degree murder. The trial was short. The evidence was clear. Robert didn't deny it. He was drunk. He was angry. He killed a man. And in 1965, that meant death. The judge sentenced him to death by gas chamber. Robert was 22 years old. He'd be 25 when Johnny Cash walked into Folsom Prison. 3 years on death row. 3 years in a 6x9 cell. 23 hours a day, locked up. 1 hour of exercise in a small yard. Alone. Always alone. Robert had a daughter, Linda. She was 5 years old. When he went to prison, her mother, Robert's girlfriend, Sarah, brought her to visit once. Just once. Sarah couldn't handle it. Couldn't handle bringing a little girl to death row. Couldn't handle watching Robert through bulletproof glass. Couldn't handle explaining to Linda why Daddy lived in a cage. So Sarah stopped coming. Stopped bringing Linda, and Robert understood. What kind of father was he? A murderer. A man waiting to die. Better, Linda, forget him. Better she grow up thinking he was gone. Better she'll never know the truth. 3 years, Robert read books. Wrote letters, nobody answered. Listened to the radio when guards allowed it. And waited. Waited for the day they'd walk him to the gas chamber. Strap him in. Close the door. Drop the pellets. And end it all. And on January 13th, 1968, Johnny Cash came to Folsom Prison to give a concert. Why Johnny cared. Johnny Cash, the man in black, country music legend. Voice like gravel. Songs about prisoners and trains and heartbreak and redemption. Johnny had been singing about prisons his whole career. Folsom Prison Blues. I Walk the Line. Songs that inmates knew by heart. But why? Why did Johnny care so much about prisoners? Because Johnny understood what it felt like to be trapped. To be written off. To be told you're worthless. Johnny grew up poor Arkansas. Depression-era, cotton fields. His family had nothing. His father was a sharecropper. They moved from town to town, looking for work. Johnny picked cotton as a boy. 12 hours a day. Bleeding fingers. Bent back. For pennies. When Johnny was 12 years old, his older brother Jack died. Sawmill accident. Cut almost in half. Bled out in front of Johnny. Their father blamed Johnny. Said Johnny should have been there. Should have stopped it. Should have died instead. Johnny carried that guilt his whole life. Turned to music. Turned to drugs. Got arrested multiple times in the 1960s. Amphetamines, barbiturates, pills to stay awake. Pills to sleep. Pills to feel nothing. By 1967, Johnny was a mess. His career was falling apart. His first marriage was over. He was addicted, arrested, broken, but he met June Carter. She pulled him back, helped him get clean, helped him find purpose. And Johnny decided, if he was going to make music, it had to mean something. It had to help people who were where he'd been. Lost, trapped, written off. So Johnny started thinking about prisoners. Real prisoners. Men, incels. Men's society had forgotten. Men who'd done terrible things but were still human, still capable of redemption, still deserving of being seen. Johnny had never actually been in prison. He'd been arrested a few times, drugs, mostly, but never served real time. Never been locked up, never known what it felt like to be behind bars with no way out. So, in 1968, Johnny decided to do something about that. He wanted to perform for real prisoners. Not in some theater, not in some arena, in an actual prison, for actual inmates. For men who had nothing, who'd lost everything, who needed to hear that someone out there still saw them as human. Columbia Records said yes, they'd record the concert, release it as a live album. And on January 13, 1968, Johnny Cash walked into Folsom Prison with his band, his wife, June Carter, and a whole lot of courage. He didn't know about Robert yet, didn't know that in the audience would be a man on death row, a man with 2 months to live, a man who'd write him a note that would change everything. January 13, 1968. Robert woke up in his cell. Another day closer to death. His execution date had been set, March 15, 1968. 2 months away. 61 days. But today was different. Today, Johnny Cash was coming. Robert had heard about it a week earlier. A guard told him, Johnny Cash is doing a concert here. Even death row gets to go. Warden's orders. One last thing before the guard didn't finish. He didn't have to. Robert couldn't believe it. He'd been listening to Johnny Cash for years. On the radio, in his cell. Folsom Prison Blues. That song about being stuck in Folsom Prison, about hearing a train, about freedom being so close but impossible to reach. Robert knew every word. He'd sung it to himself, alone, in the dark, imagining what it would be like to be on that train, to be free, to go back and undo everything, to not kill that man, to not be here. And now Johnny Cash was coming to Folsom, and Robert would get to see him live. In person, Robert hadn't felt hope in 3 years. Hope was dangerous on death row. Hope made you think maybe something would change. Maybe you'd get a pardon. Maybe someone would save you. But nobody saves you on death row. You just wait and die. Still, Johnny Cash today. Robert would get to see him. Robert showered, put on his cleanest prison uniform, combed his hair. The guards laughed, getting pretty for Johnny, but Robert didn't care. This was it. His last concert. His last moment of being human, of feeling something other than fear and waiting. At 1 p.m., guards came to escort death row inmates to the cafeteria. Robert walked in shackles, hands cuffed, guards on both sides. He sat in the back corner, death row section, separated from general population, always separated. Robert looked around. 2,000 men, all waiting, all buzzing with energy. And then Johnny Cash walked on stage. 2,000 inmates packed into the cafeteria. Guards everywhere, tension in the air. These weren't polite theater audiences. These were men who'd been locked up for years, men who'd committed terrible crimes, men who had nothing to lose. Johnny walked on stage, black suit, black boots, acoustic guitar, and he opened with these words, "Hello, I'm Johnny Cash." The place exploded, cheering, screaming, stomping. These men knew who Johnny was. They'd listened to his records, sung his songs in their cells. He was one of them, or at least, he sang like he was. Johnny played Folsom Prison Blues. The crowd went wild. He played I Walked the Line, Orange Blossom Special, The Long Black Veil. Every song hit harder in that cafeteria than it ever had in any concert hall, because these men understood. They understood what it meant to be trapped, to be labeled, to be written off, to be waiting for death, and Johnny knew they understood. That's why he was there. Halfway through the concert, during a break between songs, Robert made a decision. He'd been sitting there, listening, watching Johnny sing Folsom Prison Blues, watching 2,000 men sing along, watching Johnny treat them like humans, not animals, not numbers, humans. And Robert thought, I want to tell him. I want him to know what this means. I want him to know that a man on death row, a man who killed someone, got to feel alive today. Robert asked a guard for paper, pen. The guard looked suspicious. What for? I want to write to Johnny Cash. A thank you note. That's all. The guard hesitated, then handed him a small piece of paper. A pen. Make it quick. Robert wrote. Mr. Cash, my name is Robert. I'm on death row. I've been here for 3 years. In 2 months, I'm scheduled to be executed. I don't have much time left. But today, I got to leave my cell. I got to sit in this cafeteria. I got to hear you sing live. This is my last wish. Thank you for making it come true. I'll die happy now. Robert folded the note, gave it to the guard. Can you give this to Mr. Cash, please? The guard looked at the note, read it. His expression changed. Softer, he nodded. I'll make sure he gets it. Robert watched as the guard walked to the stage, handed the note to Johnny, and Robert's heart pounded. Would Johnny read it? Would he care? Would he? Johnny opened the note, read it. His face changed. He looked out at the audience, looking for something, someone, and Robert knew Johnny was looking for him. Halfway through the concert, during a break between songs, a guard approached the stage. He handed Johnny a folded piece of paper. A note from one of the inmates. Johnny opened it, read it, looked out at the sea of faces, and his expression changed. He folded the note, put it in his pocket, and kept playing. But after the next song, Johnny did something nobody expected. He stopped, looked at the guards, looked at the inmates, and he spoke. Johnny, I just got a note from someone in the audience. I want to read it to you. The cafeteria went silent. Johnny, reading, Mr. Cash, my name is Robert. I'm on death row. I've been here for 3 years. In 2 months, I'm scheduled to be executed. I don't have much time left. But today, I got to leave my cell. I got to sit in this cafeteria. I got to hear you sing live. This is my last wish. Thank you for making it come true. I'll die happy now. Robert, the silence was deafening. 2,000 men. Not a sound, just the weight of those words hanging in the air. Johnny folded the note, looked at the guards, and then he said something that changed everything. Johnny, where's Robert? A guard pointed to the back corner. Death row inmates were separated, sitting in their own section, under heavy watch. Johnny, Robert, can you stand up? In the back corner, a young man stood, 25 years old, thin, pale, prison uniform, shackles on his wrists, scared but standing. John. Robert, come up here. The guards looked at each other, confused, concerned. You don't bring death row inmates on stage. You don't let them near the performers. It's against protocol. It's dangerous. It's Johnny. Bring him up here, please. The guards hesitated. Then, slowly, they escorted Robert through the crowd. 2 guards, 1 on each side, shackles still on, walking toward the stage. 2,000 inmates watching. Silent. Robert reached the stage, climbed the steps, stood next to Johnny Cash, the man in black, and the man waiting to die. Johnny, Robert, you wrote me a note. You said this was your last wish. To hear me sing. Well, you heard me sing, but I got a better idea. Johnny handed Robert a microphone. Johnny, how about you sing with me? Ring of Fire. Robert stood there, shaking, microphone in hand. 2,000 inmates staring at him, guards ready to pull him off stage at any second, and Johnny Cash smiling at him like they were old friends. Johnny, you know, Ring of Fire. Robert nodded. Johnny, good, let's do it. Follow my lead. Johnny counted it off. The band started playing. That iconic horn intro, the rhythm, the energy. Ring of Fire, one of Johnny's biggest hits. And Robert, 25 years old, 2 months from death, started singing. At first, his voice was quiet, shaky, scared, but Johnny kept singing, kept smiling, kept encouraging him. And slowly, Robert's voice got stronger, louder, more confident. Love is a burning thing. 2,000 inmates started clapping, stomping, cheering, not for Johnny, for Robert, for one of their own, for a man on death row getting to do something impossible. And it burns, burns, burns. Robert was crying, singing and crying, his voice cracking with emotion. But he kept going, kept singing, because this was it. This was his moment, his last moment of being alive, being human, being more than a prisoner waiting to die. The Ring of Fire. Johnny put his arm around Robert's shoulders, sang right next to him. 2 voices, one famous, one forgotten. Together, equal, human. The song ended. The cafeteria exploded. Standing ovation. 2,000 inmates on their feet. Guards clapping. Even the warden standing in the back had tears in his eyes. Johnny hugged Robert, whispered something in his ear, something nobody else heard. Then the guards took Robert back to his seat, back to death row, back to waiting. But for 4 minutes, Robert had been free. After the concert, Johnny went back to his dressing room. June Carter was there. She'd watched the whole thing. She was crying. June, Johnny, what did you say to him? To Robert, at the end of the song. Johnny, I told him I'd remember him. I told him the world would know his name. I told him he mattered. June, how are you going to do that? Johnny, I don't know yet, but I will. I promise. March 1968, 2 months later. March 15, 1968. 10 a.m. Folsom State Prison. Execution day. Robert woke up at 5 a.m., couldn't sleep, hadn't slept in days. Today was the day he'd been waiting for, the day he'd been dreading, the day he'd die. The warden came to his cell at 7 a.m. Robert, you have visitors? Your daughter, and her mother. Robert's heart stopped. Linda, Sarah, they came. After 3 years, they came to say goodbye. Robert was escorted to the visiting room. Behind glass, Linda was 8 years old now, 3 years older than the last time he'd seen her. She looked like Sarah, same eyes, same smile, but scared, confused, not understanding. Sarah held Linda's hand, both of them crying. Robert picked up the phone. Sarah picked up hers. Sarah, Robert, I'm sorry. I should have brought her sooner. I didn't know how to tell her, how to explain. Robert, it's okay. You're here now. That's what matters. Robert looked at Linda through the glass. His daughter, who he'd never see grow up, never walk down the aisle, never meet her kids, never be there for Robert. Linda, honey, can you hear me? Linda nodded, tears streaming down her face. Robert, I want you to know something. I did bad things, very bad things, and I have to pay for them. But I love you. I always loved you, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, I won't be there for you. Linda pressed her hand against the glass. Robert pressed his hand on the other side. As close as they could get. Robert, your mom is going to take care of you. She's a good person. Better than me. Listen to her. Be good. Be better than me. Promise. Linda crying. I promise, Daddy. Robert, good girl. I love you. Linda. Always remember that. I love you. The visit ended at 8 a.m. Robert was escorted back to his cell. And he thought about Johnny Cash. About Ring of Fire. About singing on stage. About feeling alive. He thought. At least I got that. At least for 4 minutes. I was more than a murderer. I was human. At 10 a.m. Guards came. It's time. Robert walked to the gas chamber. Small room. Steel chair. Straps a window where witnesses would watch. The warden was there. A priest. A doctor. Witnesses from the state. Robert sat in the chair. Guards strapped him in. Arms, legs, chest. Tight. No escape. No way out. The warden asked, Robert Miller, do you have any last words? Robert looked at the window. At the people watching. At the warden. At the priest. And he said, thank you, Johnny Cash. That's all. 3 words. And then they closed the door. Sealed it. Dropped the cyanide pellets into the acid. The gas rose. Robert breathed. Coughed. Convulsed. And in 4 minutes, he was gone. Robert Miller, 25 years old. Executed March 15, 1968. 2 months after singing Ring of Fire. With Johnny Cash. 2 months later. March 15, 1968. Robert was executed. Gas chamber. Folsom State Prison. 25 years old. 3 years on death row. Dead. His last words. According to the prison records, thank you, Johnny Cash. Johnny found out a week later. He was devastated. He'd known it was coming. Robert had told him, but knowing and feeling are different things. Johnny went into the studio, listened to the recording from Folsom Prison, found the moment when he read Robert's note, found the recording of Ring of Fire with Robert singing, and he made a decision. He was going to keep his promise. After Robert died, Sarah moved, left California, went to Tennessee, started over. She never told people about Robert, never told neighbors, never told Linda's teachers. She said Linda's father died, which was true, but she didn't say how, didn't say why. Linda grew up not understanding. She knew her father was gone. She knew he'd been in prison, but she didn't know the details, didn't know about the murder, didn't know about death row. Sarah thought it was better that way. Better, Linda, not carry that shame, but Linda knew something was missing. Other kids had fathers. She didn't. Other kids talked about their dads. She couldn't, and she felt ashamed. Different, broken. Then May 1968, Sarah was listening to the radio. A new album had just come out. Johnny Cash at Folsom Prison. Live recording. The DJs were talking about it, playing songs, and Sarah froze, because she remembered Johnny Cash. The concert. Robert had told her about it in that last visit, how Johnny had brought him on stage, how they'd sung Ring of Fire, how it was the best moment of Robert's life. Sarah went to the record store, bought the album, brought it home, put it on the turntable, and listened. Folsom Prison Blues. I Walked the Line. Orange Blossom Special. And then, in the liner notes on the back of the album, she read it. Liner notes Johnny Cash wrote, during the concert, I received a note from a man on death row. His name was Robert. He wrote that this concert was his last wish, that he'd be executed soon, that he wanted to thank me for this moment. I brought Robert on stage. We sang Ring of Fire together. 2 months later, I learned Robert was executed. His last words were, thank you, Johnny Cash. This album is dedicated to Robert and to all the men at Folsom who reminded me what it means to be human. Johnny Cash. 1968, Sarah cried. Reading those words, seeing Robert's name, knowing the world now knew, knowing Johnny Cash kept his promise. She called Linda into the room. Linda was 8 years old. Sarah showed her the album, read her the liner notes, and told her the truth. Sarah, Linda, that's your father. Robert, he was in prison. He did bad things, but he was still your father, and Johnny Cash remembered him, made sure the world knew he existed, made sure he wasn't just a number. Linda stared at the album, at the words, at her father's name in print, on a Johnny Cash record. From that day forward, Sarah played that album once a week. Every Sunday, she and Linda would sit in the living room, listen to Johnny Cash, listen to Ring of Fire, and imagine Robert, on stage, singing Alive. It became a ritual, a way to remember, a way to connect to a man Linda barely knew but desperately wanted to understand. At Folsom Prison, the album. In May 1968, Columbia Records released Johnny Cash at Folsom Prison. It became one of the biggest albums of Johnny's career, went to #1 on the country charts, #13 on the pop charts, revitalized Johnny's career, made him a legend. Critics called it raw, authentic, real. This wasn't Johnny performing for a polite audience. This was Johnny in a prison, with men who'd killed, who'd robbed, who'd destroyed lives. And somehow, Johnny connected with them, made them feel human, made them feel seen. The album sold millions. Radio played it constantly. Folsom Prison Blues became Johnny's signature song all over again. And millions of people read those liner notes. Read about Robert, about a man on death row who got to sing Ring of Fire and die happy. Letters poured into Columbia Records, into Johnny's management, from people who'd been touched by Robert's story, from families of inmates, from people who believed in redemption, in second chances, in seeing prisoners as human. But Johnny kept his promise. He didn't use Robert's last name, didn't exploit him, just told his story, and let Robert's humanity speak for itself. Johnny didn't forget Robert, and Robert's daughter never forgot Johnny. 1984 The letter. 16 years later, February 1984, a letter arrived at my studio. For American Top 40. For me, from a woman named Linda. Let me read it to you. Casey, reading Linda's letter. Dear Casey, my name is Linda. I'm 40 years old. I live in Tennessee, and I'm writing to you because I heard you mention Johnny Cash on your show last week. You were talking about Ring of Fire, and it made me cry. You see, my father sang that song with Johnny Cash. In 1968, at Folsom Prison, my father's name was Robert. He was on death row. He was 25 years old, and Johnny Cash let him sing Ring of Fire on stage, in front of 2,000 people, in front of the world. 2 months later, my father was executed. I was 8 years old when he died. I barely remember him, but I remember my mother playing that Johnny Cash album at Folsom Prison. Over and over she'd point to the liner notes and say, "That's your father." Johnny Cash remembered him. The world knows he existed. Casey, I'm writing to you because I want to say thank you. Thank you for playing Johnny Cash's music. Thank you for keeping his story alive. Because when you play Ring of Fire, I think of my father. I think of that one day when he got to be human, when he got to sing, when he got to feel alive. My father made terrible mistakes. He hurt people. He deserved to be punished. But he was still my father. And for 4 minutes in 1968, Johnny Cash treated him like a human being. Not a monster, not a number, a person. Johnny Cash kept his promise. He told the world about my father. And now, every time someone plays that album, my father's story lives on. Thank you, Casey, for remembering, for playing the music, for helping people like me feel less alone. Linda, Tennessee. Casey Kasem. I finished reading that letter, and I sat there, in my studio alone, and I cried. Because that's what music does. It connects us. It reminds us we're human, even when we've done terrible things, even when we're sitting on death row waiting to die, even when we've been forgotten by everyone. Johnny Cash didn't forget Robert, and Robert's daughter didn't forget Johnny. And now, 16 years later, I'm telling you this story, so you don't forget either. What happened to Johnny? Johnny Cash kept performing in prisons for the rest of his life. Not for the publicity, not for the albums. Because he believed in redemption, he believed that everyone, no matter what they'd done, deserved to be seen, to be heard, to be treated as human. He recorded another prison album in 1969, at San Quentin, even bigger than Folsom, even more successful. But Johnny always said Folsom was special. Because of Robert, because of that moment when a man on death row got to sing Ring of Fire and feel alive one last time. Johnny died in September 2003, 71 years old. But his legacy lives on. In the music, in the stories, in moments like Robert's. What happened to Linda? I called Linda. After I read her letter, I wanted to hear her voice, to thank her for writing, to tell her I'd never forget her father's story. We talked for an hour. She told me about growing up without a father, about the shame of having a parent on death row, about playing that Folsom Prison album and feeling connected to a man she barely knew. Linda, on phone. Casey, I was 8 years old when my father died. 8. I barely remember him. I remember visiting him once. When I was 5, through glass, he couldn't touch me, couldn't hug me, just put his hand on the glass, and I put mine on the other side. I didn't understand why. I didn't understand prison. I didn't understand death row. I just knew Daddy was behind glass, and I couldn't reach him. When my mother told me he died, I didn't cry. I didn't understand death. I just thought, now I'll never see him again, even through glass. But then my mother bought that Johnny Cash album, and she played it every Sunday, and she'd point to the liner notes and say, "That's your father." Johnny Cash remembered him. And I'd listen to Ring of Fire, and I'd imagine my father on stage, singing, happy, alive. That album became everything to me. It was the only connection I had to my father, the only proof that he existed, that he mattered, that he was more than a murderer, more than a death row inmate, more than a statistic. Casey, Linda. What was it like, growing up knowing your father was executed, knowing what he did? Linda, it was hard. So hard, I couldn't tell anyone. My mother made me promise. Don't tell people your father was in prison. Don't tell them he was executed. It'll only make life harder for you. So I lied. When kids asked about my father, I said he died in a car accident, or that he left when I was little. Anything but the truth. But I carried that shame, that secret. Every day, I felt like I was less than other kids, like I was broken, like I came from bad blood. And then when I was 16, I read an article about prison reform, about families of inmates, about children of death row prisoners. And I realized, I'm not alone. There are thousands of kids like me. Thousands of kids carrying shame for their parents' crimes. That's when I decided I was going to help them. I was going to make sure other kids didn't feel as alone as I did. Casey, is that why you became a prison reform advocate? Linda, yes, I work with families of inmates now, especially children. Kids who visit their parents in prison. Kids who don't understand why mommy or daddy can't come home. Kids who carry shame they don't deserve. I tell them, your parent made a mistake, a terrible mistake. But that doesn't define you. You are not your parents' crime. You are your own person. You matter. And Casey, I tell them about my father, about Robert, about how Johnny Cash saw him as human, how Johnny gave him 4 minutes of dignity, how Johnny kept his promise, because if Johnny Cash can see a murderer on death row as human, then we can all see each other as human, no matter what we've done. Casey, Linda, that's beautiful. Your father would be so proud of you. Linda crying, I hope so. I hope wherever he is, he knows. He knows I didn't forget him. He knows I'm trying to help other kids like me. He knows his story mattered. Casey, when you play Ring of Fire, I think of my father. I think of him on that stage, singing, free, happy. For 4 minutes he wasn't a prisoner. He wasn't a murderer. He was just Robert, a man who loved music, a man who loved me. Thank you for remembering him. Thank you for telling his story. Thank you for helping people like me feel less alone. Casey, Linda, thank you. Thank you for writing. Thank you for trusting me with your father's story. And thank you for the work you're doing. You're honoring him. You're making his life mean something. Linda, that's all I've ever wanted. For my father's life to mean something. For his death to mean something. For that moment with Johnny Cash to mean something. Thank you, Casey. Thank you for keeping the promise alive. She told me she became a prison reform advocate, works with families of inmates, helps children of incarcerated parents, because she knows what it's like to love someone the world has written off. And she told me this. Linda, on phone. Linda, thank you for writing. Thank you for sharing. Your father mattered, and Johnny made sure the world knew it. The lesson this story isn't about redemption. It's not about second chances. Robert didn't get a second chance. He was executed. He died. But for 4 minutes, he got to be human. He got to sing. He got to feel what it's like to be on stage, to be heard, to be seen, to matter. Johnny Cash could have ignored that note, could have kept playing, could have left Robert sitting in the back corner with the other death row inmates. But he didn't. He stopped the concert. He brought Robert on stage. He gave him a microphone. He let him sing, not because it would sell albums, not because it would make headlines, but because Robert asked, and Johnny believed everyone deserves to be seen. Epilogue, if you ever listen to Johnny Cash at Folsom Prison, read the liner notes. Read about Robert, remember him. Remember that somewhere, there's a woman named Linda who still plays that album and thinks about her father. And if you ever get a chance to see someone really see them, don't pass it up. Don't ignore them. Don't write them off, because we all want the same thing. To be remembered, to matter, to be seen as human. Johnny Cash saw Robert, and Robert's daughter never forgot. Keep your feet on the ground, and keep reaching for the stars. This is Casey Kasem, and this was for you, Robert, and for you, Linda, and for Johnny Cash, who kept his promise. Good night, everybody.